Imagine if a modern war was recreated in Minecraft, with guns, vehicles, rebel factions, and 100 players split into 3 different nations. We created a public server with a giant war-torn map and split players into 3 teams with unique abilities. Their mission is to build a base and defeat the other teams in a devastating war. They'll also have to survive several world events like rebel invasions, the trials of winter, and deadly radiation poisoning from a nuclear bunker. Players are also set to hardcore mode, so once they die, their nations will have to soldier on without them. Which nation will gather the most advanced weapons and come out on top? Find out as 100 players simulate the story of Minecraft's war. To begin, the players spawned into their own unique regions of the map. The nation of Northgard found themselves in a towering mountain range. Aquaria was in a string of islands surrounded by water, and Stormrun made their home on the plains. However, they weren't able to explore their entire regions just yet. Each team was confined by a massive bedrock wall that would later drop in the game. Each nation's first perks were already active, and they had to put them to the test quickly. Soon after spawning, each team was ambushed by a group of rebel fighters. Stormrun used their increased run speed to kite the rebels, while punching them whenever they could. Northgard put their jump boost to good use, narrowly dodging bullets. Aquaria was at the strongest disadvantage, with water breathing being their first perk. Each team fought bravely, but by the time the rebels had been killed, their numbers had dwindled significantly. Luckily, each faction's early de facto figureheads, Maxcraft, Princess Anna, and Bronzo, all survived this first attack. With the survivors low on health, they needed to find food to regain their strength.
We're working on it. I'm finding more mushrooms.
This was Northgard's first goal, and they quickly created a large plot of farmland between 2 mountains. They used the leaves from a massive fallen tree to make bone meal and speed their crops' growth. But with so many mouths to feed, it still wasn't enough. One player charitably dedicated most of his time to fishing, which helped feed the entire nation. While some Northgardians focused on collecting food, the others began to explore the area, heading into the side of the mountain and slaying mobs. After a while, they formed a clever plan for their base that would give them an advantage when the war started getting heated.
Tater's over there building us a base above ground, okay? But we are the Northgard, we have this giant mountain. I think that we should build our actual base in the mountain and have a decoy base above ground.
That is smart.
Across the map, the nation of Aquaria had already formed a sense of unity,
So everyone start congaing.
and their first goal was an ambitious one.
We're gonna wipe out Northgard as soon as the walls drop.
Surprisingly, they weren't interested in going in the ocean, despite their ability being geared towards use in the water. Many of them weren't interested in the chore of cultivating a food source either. Instead, they dubbed themselves a band of pirates and formed a conga line that headed down into the caves. Those who stayed behind punched the limited amount of grass on their island to try to get wheat seeds and gathered wood to begin building a shelter. Between their seaside crops and the dried kelp they were able to make, they had more than enough food. The Aquarians also established their first laws: thou shalt not team kill, and thou shalt help thy friend. Though their strategy of beginning mining early would serve them well later in the battle, some players began to suspect that they had a spy on their team.
Well, what if Sunfire is
I
a spy?
actually was
Just saying
about
that.
to say that.
There is that too, so keep your eyes peeled.
Next up is Stormrun, the nation of the plains. Their players were split into 2 groups, those who decided to get tools and weapons first, and those who wanted to prioritize building a farm. Several Stormrunners took to the caves after crafting basic tools and weapons, but were ill-prepared to fight the mobs they found down there.
What is with this skeleton? This hole will forever be known as the skeleton hole of doom.
It wasn't all for nothing though, because they found the resources to make a new source of food: mushroom stew. Some players met their deaths underground, but those who survived were able to gather enough bones to speed the growth of their crops above ground. They also discovered that weapons were easy to make, so they became the first nation to craft their own guns and ammo. Things were looking good for each of the 3 nations by the time the base building contest began.
The build challenge? Better get started.
The build challenge is starting now, so make sure to make something really cool, something war-themed.
Each of the teams had the same amount of time to build a base with enough defenses to help protect against invasions. The Game Master explained that he would judge each of the nation's bases, and their placement in the contest would determine how much loot they got in an airdrop afterward. With that, each of the 3 nations began putting their resources towards building the best bases they could.
All right, we're building our base in the sand area.
Aquaria had already gotten a head start. and began making fences to serve as a perimeter. They also planned to lay out for enough bunks to house them all, but got distracted by crafting shields and guns. Over in Northgard, Maxwell Dallas from Maxcraft stepped up to unite the team for the build battle.
We have this decoy base that we plan to use eventually, and we have our mountain base, but from the sounds of it, we haven't made a lot of progress on it. My thinking is we present the decoy.
They accelerated the plans they'd thought of earlier to make a decoy base out in the open and hide their real base inside the mountain. The Stormrunners decided to create a fortress-style build, putting emphasis on the defense requirements of the build battle. While a player named Kay Sheritz was building a sign to show the world their national pride, rebels began to flood into their safe haven.
Oh, no!
Banding together, the players were able to defeat every last one, gaining more guns and ammo in the process. In the midst of the build battle, night fell, bringing with it an unexpected danger: phantoms. Due to the large number of players in one area, the sky was filled by the bloodthirsty undead mobs. One of Stormrun's best fighters, Hizozo, was killed during the struggle.
Oh no, Hizozo!
After his death, the players scrambled into their storage house to avoid the same fate.
Everyone inside!
A few brave Stormrunners equipped guns and iron armor, then climbed to the roof of the storage house to shoot down the phantoms that had disrupted their building efforts. The phantom attacks wreaked havoc on Northgard, killing several players and sending the rest into the mountain's caves for shelter. Without the weapons and armor needed to defend themselves, they were forced into hiding.
I think I might just stay underground,
preventing them from making any progress on their decoy base outside. The Aquarians decided to be cautious during the phantom attacks as well, remaining inside their shelter. They spent their time crafting tools and armor until day came, saving them from the relentless phantoms.
Oh jeez!
In the daylight, they took advantage of the mobs that lingered around their base, killing them for loot. Afterward, they continued working on their base, building a graveyard for all their fallen comrades.
Conga around the grave.
Before long, the build battle was over, and the Game Master visited each nation to judge what they'd come up with.
All right, what do we got? What's going on?
Aquaria presented a wooden bungalow built beside their farm, with ample bunks for the soldiers, a storage and crafting area, and a watchtower. They attempted to gain extra points by singing a sea shanty, but the Game Master wasn't impressed.
This is not going to get you any points in the build battle. This is not going to get you any points.
Stormrun's fortress was fortified with cobblestone walls, surrounding their storage house, farm, a multi-purpose crafting building, and several dirt huts. Northgard's base included a farm, a loosely organized storage and crafting zone, and a wooden cabin with a mysterious tunnel leading into the mountain. Maxwell Dallas explained their plans for the tunnel, slightly redeeming their unfinished build in the Game Master's eyes.
So it's like modern art. Like, it doesn't look very good, but it has some sort of meaning behind it.
After some deliberation, he ranked the three nations' builds and awarded them each in the form of airdropped loot crates. Northgard came in third, Aquaria second, and Stormrun won first place, earning them an RPG, some rockets, grenades, and plenty of other weapons to arm their forces. While each team was distributing the new loot amongst their soldiers, the massive bedrock walls fell, leaving them free to explore the world. There are ruins, villages, mines, and military bases around the map filled with loot, though none of the players knew where they were located. The North Guardian suddenly realized the sheer scale of the mountains that their base was nestled beside, and began climbing to check them out.
Alright, Joe, we gotta be careful.
They took advantage of the area they'd been unable to mine before, and started collecting iron. Realizing the advantage that the height of the mountain gave them, they decided to build an armory near the peak and wait for the other two nations to come to them. So instead of exploring outside of their mountain range, they continued collecting materials, crafting weapons, and preparing for the battle ahead. Stormrun was left divided after the walls fell,
Everyone hit the brakes!
with some players wanting to continue mining and others feeling the need to explore.
Who wants to go with me? I'll cross the walls.
They decided to split off into two groups, and the player Burnt Waffles led a small team on a reconnaissance mission, hoping for a chance to shed some blood.
To the pigs!
After wandering through the plains and killing mobs for meat, they found a pair of abandoned villages, which supplied them with books, lava, and other materials, taking them one step closer to crafting a nuke launcher. The Stormrunners who went mining gathered redstone and iron, and dug all the way down to bedrock looking for diamonds. Thanks to their unique faction perk, Fortune Picks, they got a decent-sized yield from the few blocks of diamond ore that they found.
And my lucky perk is working. I just got 4 diamonds from 2 things.
Over in Aquaria, some interesting developments had happened after the walls fell. As they were crafting boats to journey away from home, the self-proclaimed Iron Hat Pirates were reunited with a player who they mistakenly thought had died. They'd also discovered how to craft airplanes,
Whoa.
which they used to make some quick headway across the map. Those who remained behind readied the base in case of invasion, preparing a method of attacking from underwater.
So we have water breathing, so we don't need boats. We can just swim underneath, and they wouldn't expect us from the water. Especially with our blue names, it would blend in.
Gathering ocean materials and taking a head count of the surviving players.
Dark Horse is still alive.
Even more surprisingly, they received some private messages from a Northgard player named Grease.
I have an operative on the way.
The Aquarians invited him to unofficially join their team if he gave them the coordinates of the Northgard base. As those negotiations progressed, each team was given its second perk. Stormrun received the aforementioned Fortune Picks, an ability that automatically applied fortune to anything they mined, regardless of the tool they were using. Northgard was given the Juggernaut perk, which gave them a health boost that could prove crucial in a fight.
Sick. These are gonna be extra tough.
And Aquaria received Dolphin's Grace, helping them move through their territory more quickly.
Let's go. That's gonna make the tactic even easier.
The Game Master then announced that it was time for the Election World event, when each nation would select a general to be their leader. The general would then be given a special perk that no other player on the map would have. Since Northgard's ranks had shrunk dramatically, it was easy for the remaining soldiers to agree on electing Maxwell Dallas as their leader.
5-star General, Maxwell.
Upon informing the Game Master of their decision, Max was given 3 planes, dramatically improving Northgard's mobility. As soon as they figured out how to fuel them, they took off. And after some stumbling blocks with learning how to fly,
No.
2 scout missions left the mountainous region at last. Over in Stormrun, they opted to use a more complicated form of government, with player K. Sherritz being the official general and Crystal Shara calling the shots as a shadow leader. After explaining their decision to the Game Master, K. Sherritz was awarded 2 tanks,
Yeah, baby.
which could be fueled with coal and filled with tank ammo to use as a deadly mobile weapon. They quickly discovered that driving ate up their coal resources, so they decided to use them as defensive weapons outside the wall rather than taking it with them to confront enemies. In Aquaria, Fleshgun declared himself the leader,
I'm the leader.
and after confirming that no one objected to this, the Game Master gave him a large warship that could carry nearly their entire army. At last, Northgard's defector Grease arrived at the Aquaria base, and they began discussing plans for an ambush of the Northgard base.
All right, we're gonna attack the Northgard first then.
They had several advantages, including various means of quick transportation, and the fact that they were the only team whispering to each other through the in-game chat. In fact,
Welcome to
by the
the
time
crew.
Grease and Fleshkin were discussing plans to attack Northgard, the Aquarian player Chaotic Shift made it all the way into the mountains in one of the airplanes they'd built earlier. Fleshgun asked him to return back to the base. Then they launched an attack on Northgard. Rather than using any of their vehicles, they opted to swim out of their region and climb into the mountains on foot. The journey was a long, slow one, with members getting lost and the team needing to stop and regroup often. Before making their attack, they dug into one of the mountains to hide, while they enchanted armor and crafted some last-minute supplies. By the time they arrived at the coordinates Grease gave them, the Northgard base had been abandoned. Both in airplanes and on foot, the North Guardians had scattered across the map, the unity of the team completely shattered. While their base was being searched, Maxwell Dallas was landing his plane on the wing of a Zeppelin tucked into the mountain range.
And landing.
While he was gathering loot from inside, another plane arrived carrying some Aquarian players who hadn't gone on the ambush mission. Max was outnumbered, but as soon as the Aquarians realized that the Zeppelin was occupied, they turned to run. By the time Max heard them and emerged from the Zeppelin, they were long gone. Feeling bold, he got in his plane and flew in pursuit of them, but lost their trail by the time he was able to round the mountain they disappeared behind. The rest of the nation of Northgard were scattered across the map. Starkhill was mining, Grease was making his way towards his Aquarian friends, and several other players were seeking a fight with Stormrun. One group, led by Colt Guy, wandered across the plains, finding some mostly abandoned villages and a castle ruin along the way. Another group ran into some rebel fighters, who gave them a beating but ultimately lost. The new loot from this encounter included a flamethrower, which emboldened the North Guardians' fighting spirit. And then they found it, the Stormrun base, which they quickly assaulted. They put up a tough fight, using all the weapons they had at their disposal, but the scattered Northgard forces were no match for the tanks that Stormrun used for defense. Before a single player could penetrate the perimeter, the Northgard soldiers were killed. As Maxwell Dallas arrived
So I
back
think
home
I'm
from
good
his
for
adventure
now.
to the Zeppelin, he found what his teammates have been looking for: the Storm Runners, who had just blown up Starkill. After chasing Max up the mountain, Storm Run managed to corner him on his own home ground. During the struggle, Max took down Burnt Waffles, but was too outnumbered to survive the encounter.
Yes. Yes.
Suddenly, the world was blanketed in white. Winter had arrived. During this world event, players and mobs slowly lose health if they aren't near a heat source. All water source blocks freeze into ice, and crops stop growing, causing a potential shortage of food if players are caught unprepared. Kay Sherritts and Almighty Toast made a path of torches up to Northgard's armory and raided their chests for guns, ammo, and other resources while they waited for the weather to pass. Having already killed all of Northgard's animals, they had plenty of food to survive the storm. The only other storm runners, Bronzo and Crystal Chara, arrived back home at their base in time to shelter from the cold, narrowly missing the Northgardians who just left. Most of the Aquarians had made their way back home after their unsuccessful raid on Northgard, so they had plenty of resources they could use to stay warm. There were exceptions though, and a few Aquarian players who'd struck it out on their own were caught without a heat source miles from anyone who could help them. Before long, they succumbed to the icy winds of winter. Northgard was the most ill-prepared for the freeze, with Colt Guy's group still trying to figure out where the island region of the map was located. They quickly crafted a campfire and gathered around it, using the time to cook some raw pork chops they'd collected during their trek through the plains.
Come on, stay close to the fire. Stay warm.
The storm claimed several Northgardians who had split off from the group, including the defector Grease. After a while, winter ended, and the survivors were relieved to be able to move freely throughout the world again. As the ice thawed, an Aquarian player named Bobby Tom stole into the Storm Run base, stealthily killing Crystal Chara before she could even lay eyes on him. Bronzo came to her aid too late, and fought for his life against the infiltrator, ultimately meeting his end in a bucket of lava. Ironically, because every team was out searching for someone to fight, they circled each other on the map, with only a few skirmishes breaking out between groups of players. That was when the location of the nuclear bunker was revealed. Inside, there were chests full of amazing loot, as well as the greatest weapon of all, a nuke. The promise of destruction pulled most of the players towards the same destination. Colt Guy and his band of Northgardians had just found an airdrop with 2 RPGs and several rockets inside. Then they began the long trek towards the bunker's coordinates. The Aquarians regrouped, and Flushgun gave an impassioned pirate speech.
Attack, kill, steal, and eat everyone and their tea.
With that, the largest group out of the 3 nations headed towards no man's land as quickly as they could. Kay Sherritts and his last remaining follower piled into a stolen plane
Oh, yeah.
and decided to make a quick pass by their base to gather any weapons that had been left behind earlier before heading towards the bunker. Unbeknownst to the Storm Run duo, Bobby Tom had been staking out their base after killing Bronzo and Crystal. After gathering their supplies and heading back to the plane, they traded shots with Bobby, both on ground and in the air. Bobby ran on foot, then by boat, and eventually disconnected from the server rather than trying to face his enemies. While Kay Sherritts and Almighty Toast waited for him to return, they found an airdrop that held a flamethrower and fuel. Finally, they decided it was time to head towards the bunker.
Let's fry these people.
At this point, the third and final perks were activated for each nation, giving them an additional edge in the upcoming battle. Storm Run received fire resistance, Northgard was given night vision, and Aquaria's last perk was dead silence, allowing them to walk without making audible footsteps. As each of the 3 nations made their way towards the bunker, the no man's land became filled with the last remaining players in the game. As soon as the 3 Northgardians entered the wasteland, they spotted 2 players with enchanted armor in the distance. After getting the enemy's attention, they used the sparse cover to the best of their ability,
Send them back to Davy Jones's locker.
fighting for the right to enter the bunker. In the end, all 3 of them survived the encounter, taking down the 2 Aquarians and quickly rifling through their loot. While they were distracted, another group of Aquarian players approached, led by Flushgun himself.
Alright, I'm leading this charge.
This time, the Northgardians were outnumbered, and soon they ran out of ammunition as well.
Use your axes, use your axes.
I'll take you down with me, flush gun.
As the fight turned to melee combat, one by one, Colt Guy and his comrades fell, spilling loot all over the battlefield. With that decisive battle, the nation of Northgard was eliminated from the game. While Aquaria was occupied taking down Northgard, the 2 remaining Storm Runners had fought through the radiation poisoning surrounding the bunker's entrance, and were rifling through the barrels of loot contained within. Before long, they located the biggest prize of all, a nuke.
I found the nuke.
All right, here we go. Time to go nuke Aquaria.
Knowing they'd found what they were looking for, Kay Sherritts and Almighty Toast emerged from the bunker and were airborne once again. searching for a target to take out. Down below, Flushgun's last remaining soldiers were fighting against rebels, keeping them from seeing Storm Run in the skies above. After flying around in circles, they finally spotted the Aquarians and swooped low to launch the nuke.
Let's do this for Storm Run.
The impact of the blast shook the world in a devastating display, killing all but one of the Iron Hat pirates. As Kay Sherrod's and Almighty Toast turned the plane for another pass, the Aquarian leader Flushgun readied an RPG, ready to avenge his fallen comrades with his single remaining rocket. With only half a heart remaining and everything on the line, he let loose the rocket and it struck its target, blowing his enemies to smithereens and making Aquaria the victor.